deputy director, and he said, I wish I could take what you said about Trump not being able to win and take that to the bank, but I'm not sure that the FBI can take that risk, and we need an insurance policy basically to stop Trump from being elected. So that is the reason he got kicked off the Mueller probe. And so the question is, what was that insurance policy? Most of us on the committees at this point go back to that Steele dossier that was paid for by Hillary and the Democratic Party to dig up dirt on Trump. There's a lot of fake news in there, false claims. Nevertheless, the FBI took cognizance of that dossier at some point. We're trying to figure out whether the FBI paid Christopher Steele for that, and then whether the FBI used any of that to get surveillance over Trump associates. And if that's the case, if the answer to those questions is yes, then what you have is the Obama DOJ working with the Hillary campaign and Democratic Party to get surveillance over someone associated with the opposite party. That's a major deal if true.
Right. So what about the accountability aspect of this? Because we have the American people who see this happening over and over again inside of the government. What are you doing specifically? Are there subpoenas on the table? Are contempt charges on the table for the FBI not answering your questions? Andy McCabe was on the Hill this week testifying. It doesn't seem like lawmakers are satisfied with what he said because his testimony was not in congruence with other testimony that's been given by other witnesses. So how does this actually move forward in terms of some kind of accountability and cleaning up the FBI?
So all subpoenas for sure. McCabe has come in, very unsatisfactory testimony, and you see the news today. He's moving on, and I think that may be a reason why. We need to subpoena Bruce Orr, who was one of Sally Yates, the deputy AG's right-hand man at the Justice Department. He was meeting with the author of the dossier, Christopher Steele, during the election, and his wife works for Fusion GPS. So you got to subpoena Orr, you got to subpoena the wife, you got to subpoena other folks like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page who were involved in this. They need to be under oath. They need to be deposed. None of the stuff like they did with Hillary where they just asked her some softball questions, didn't put her under oath, didn't transcribe. These are legitimate, transcribed, and if they lie, then they'll be held accountable. But contempt for sure. If the FBI isn't going to give us the information that we're asking for in terms of the dossier, then we should hold both Rosenstein and Christopher Wray in contempt.
Yeah, it's far from over. It's going to be a wild ride once we get back from the new year, I'm sure. Merry Christmas, Congressman Ron DeSantis. Thanks so much.
Merry Christmas.
And joining me now with more reaction to the tax bill and other headlines, Blaze TV host Lawrence Jones and former Democratic member of the Ohio Senate, Capri Cafaro. Hi, guys. How's it going?
Hey, good evening.
Good evening. First, I want to start with some breaking news. There's a federal judge out of Seattle who has partially lifted parts of the Trump administration's travel ban, saying that the ACLU's argument has stood in court, allowing some of that ban to be lifted. Lawrence, your response?
Well, when people talk about the accomplishments of this president, we always go back to the 12 appointees when it comes to our judges, our federal judges. This is why we need good conservative judges that respect the Constitution. Everyone knows that the president has the authority when it comes to immigration to protect this country. And what we're seeing is that another liberal judge is doing the same old thing, playing politics with immigration policy.
Capri, the ACLU is representing a Somali man who's trying to bring his family here. The judge says they've already been extensively vetted. They've passed security and medical clearances. But isn't this going to be a fight in the future, considering the president wants to end chain migration?
Certainly. I mean, there's no question about the fact that this debate is not over, as you mentioned, with the issue of chain migration. And frankly, what we're going to see in 2018 is, the possibility for immigration reform, for issues like having to deal with DACA by March. Now, obviously, the issue of the travel ban and DACA are not the same thing, but the policy issue of immigration is not going away. We do need to remember that there are 3 branches of government, and the reason why we do have appellate courts and the judicial system at large, and the framers were smart to make sure that we have balance in our government, is to ensure that no branch of government overreaches. So, you know, obviously this is within the court's purview. But there, I'm sure, will be further appeals, and I'm sure the executive will come back. The easiest way to fix this is to pass legislation.
Well, speaking of topics that aren't going away, tax reform is going to be one of them. We have an election coming up, Lawrence, and I think it's going to be very difficult for Democrats to argue against people having more money in their paychecks.
Yeah, that's going to be a difficult fight for them, Katie. You know, I wanted a little bit more when it came to the individual. I'm all in support of the corporations getting a tax cut as well. But you know what? People are going to start to see more money in their bank accounts February and March. That's what members of Congress are saying right now. And it's going to be really difficult for them to argue against it. Remember, this is something, when we talk about the president's accomplishments, this is one that's tangible. This is one that the American people are going to actually be able to feel. So this is a plus for him. I'm interested to see the Democrats' rebuttal on this.
Capri, Democrats have been arguing in the media and in their fundraising emails that this is just $1,000. It's just $2,000. It's not really the greatest thing in the world. They're not accepting the bonuses that all of these corporations are giving out as really any kind of substantial pay increase. And we've also seen corporations increasing their minimum wage to $15, which, as we've seen, is a leftist cause. Right. So how are Democrats going to use that argument going into 2018? Do you think it's really going to work?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult. I mean, I think the only argument here to be made is that you obviously need to first have a job in order to get a bonus. That's a fair fact. But the fact that there are Democrats out there saying it's only $1,000 and this is a PR move, you know, look, I'm from Ohio, and I can tell you that if an individual or a family had an extra $1,000, it's going to mean a lot at the end of the day for that family. Right. So I think that that's a little bit short-sighted and very much a coastal inside the Beltway view that $1,000 doesn't go very far. Right. Come to northeastern Ohio. That is not the case. Yeah. So my view is that Democrats really need to show what they are going to offer for the American public coming up in 2018. More than just be against something, we need to be for something. And as the other guest mentioned, you know, there could have been more done for the individual. No question about it. Let's focus on going forward, on focusing on infrastructure, focusing on how we can show that we're the adults in the room and that we can govern.
Well, Lawrence, we just had Congressman Ron DeSantis on, and he just said he's willing to bring up permanent tax cuts for individuals as soon as we get back from the so-called Christmas break after the new year. Are Democrats really going to jump on board with that because of the political implications, or are they going to resist as they have throughout President Trump's first year?
They better not. They better not resist.
I can see them resisting because this is about politics now. I'm already seeing the talking points of this only being 10 years. This can be an easy fix. Democrats can make the commitment to the American people that they're going to keep it, the percentage down, or improve it even better. How about they bring a bill to the floor and say, let's get this individual tax rate down? I think Republicans would get on board.
Well, the Republicans need to let them bring it to the floor first. They need to actually let them bring it to the floor, let them have it go through
they got to write a bill first.
All that stuff.
They actually have to produce a piece of legislation first. But my question, the follow-up on 2018, because we're almost there. We're only a couple of days away from January 1st. President Trump won because he flipped 100-plus counties that were Barack Obama blue to red for Trump. Now, how is that going to play out in counties like that where people are getting a tax break? How are Democrats going to get those voters back being based on for something? What does that for mean?
Well, let me just tell you first off, I am actually from one of those counties. My home county, Trumbull County, Ohio, voted for Donald Trump, went blue for the first time since 1928. And that's basically because Democrats voted for Donald Trump. And we do care about economic and kitchen table issues. I do think, for example, if we are able to show that, if Congressman DeSantis goes and says we're going to have a permanent tax cut and change it from a sunset to 10 years, if we get on board with something like that and do augment it, that's one way where we can show that we are willing to come together for solutions for the American people. We also have to not forget that we only have a very temporary, extension of our budget. There is a continuing resolution. So we have to deal with things like children's health and everything else, children's health, DACA, et cetera, and infrastructure.
Right. Lawrence, last word to you.
But Democrats aren't as reasonable as Capri is. Remember, Capri gets it because she's from a county that voted for Donald Trump, and they swing back and forth. So she's understanding. She understands that $1,000 when people are living paycheck to paycheck,
Pelosi, right?
Is
or
pretty
Chuck
good.
Schumer.
She's not Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer, and I think they should be listening to Capri.
Thank you.
New leadership in Washington, D.C. from the Democrat side is certainly something we're probably going to look at. And I know that that is something that is on the table. One more question that I have moving forward, Lawrence, real quickly, is how do Democrats see this playing out with the leadership in terms of Washington, D.C.? Is Nancy Pelosi going to be around much longer?
Look, I see a lot of young, fresh voices that want to be a part of the leadership. She has too much money, and we know in politics, money controls everything, at least on the Democratic side. And when you know a lot of things that happened with Bernie Sanders in the past election, I'm not sure that the Democrats have had a full audit yet, and they're willing to get rid of Nancy. That's just my opinion, though.
The first. Welcome back to Justice on this very busy night of news. My next guest says the FBI's Andrew McCabe viewed his job as one to help Democrats and hurt Trump, using whatever power he had from his FBI perch. Former DOJ attorney J. Christian Adams joins me now. It's great to see you. Now, we're going to start with what the president said about this. He's been criticizing the FBI publicly. President Trump tweeted a series of things today. This is one that he tweeted earlier. How can FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, the man in charge, along with leaking James Comey of the phony Hillary Clinton investigation, including her 33,000 illegally deleted emails, be given $700,000 for wife's campaign by Clinton puppets during investigation? Now, you were in it. You were in the Justice Department. You see how these creatures of government function. How does this happen? How is it that the FBI can treat people differently based on their political leanings?
People need to understand, these people in the FBI and DOJ, they don't think they're doing anything wrong. They think this is normal operating procedure. What the president is referring to is Andrew McCabe's wife was running for office in Virginia, got a load of money from Terry McAuliffe, the governor, who was also under investigation by the FBI. And of course, they don't have to return all that money in Virginia. They can keep it, so Andrew McCabe actually benefited. These people don't think they're doing anything wrong. They think their job, apparently Andrew McCabe thinks, is to protect Democrats.
Well, so this week, Republicans, this week and last week, have been very critical of Andrew McCabe. You have Senator Chuck Grassley, who's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, calling for him to be removed. We now hear that he's maybe going to retire here in a couple of months, making sure he gets enough time in to get his full pension. So Republican criticism seems warranted based on what we know so far.
Right, but he's still there. And best of all, Katie, he's in the HR department at the FBI where he can replicate himself. You know, I mean, they move people to HR instead of moving them out the door. But that's part of the problem is you have McCabe, you have Rod Rosenstein, who doesn't stop any of the leaks inside the Mueller investigation. He should be firing people who are leaking, not giving them the benefit of the doubt and praising them like he did this week.
So what about the firing? Because people are questioning, why is it that President Trump can't just remove Andrew McCabe from his position, right? My understanding, he is a civil servant. He is not a political appointee, and therefore the president cannot fire him. Now, can Christopher Wray, who is reported, he was the new FBI director, who is reportedly reassigned FBI top lawyer James Baker, or he has actually resigned as well. Is Christopher Wray able to do something about this problem in the FBI? Is he trying to clean house?
Wray is, but so are a lot of other people. And really the problem stops with Rod Rosenstein. Rod Rosenstein, who's the Deputy Attorney General after Sessions recused himself, he has a whole host of deputies who work for him who are giving cover to these FBI people. Anytime this gets brought up, Rosenstein and his deputies push back. They defend McCabe. They defend the FBI. So the problem is both at the FBI but also inside the DOJ.
So there's nothing that the president can do? Should the president be getting involved? Is it consequential for him to be tweeting about it? Does that hurt the Inspector General's investigation into the bias at the FBI, or is it best that he just kind of stays out of it?
Look, I think it's good that we finally have a president who fights back against these bureaucrats, because these bureaucrats have been getting away with it for a very long time. Finally, somebody's paying attention. Thank goodness they're at 1,600.
Well, what about the bureaucrats, though? Because the frustration, as I talked about in the first block with Congressman DeSantis, is there never seems to be any accountability. The IRS was turned into a political tool and weapon against conservatives. It seems like, and based on your experience and what you know, this is the same situation.
Right. Look, they have normalized politics at the Justice Department. You wrote about this about Fast and Furious. You saw this starting to happen years ago, where Holder and Obama began to turn this engine of government power into something that helps their ideological agenda. That's what's happening here. That's what happened during the election.
So how do we move forward with this? How how is it that, we live in Washington, D.C., or in Virginia, I call the freedom side of the river. It is anyway so far. It might change. But this is a blue area. This is a liberal area. The federal government is inherently deeply connected to liberal politics. So how is it that we have this going forward, and how do we make sure that there isn't political bias at the FBI?
Well, look, the people who care about this in middle America and regular real world, not around here, need to be vocal, need to tell their senator, tell their president. Don't allow this corruption to continue. Don't allow people like Andrew McCabe and Peter Strzok and that whole gang of activist law enforcement agents to influence politics. That's not their job.
So what about people who would push back and say they're not activists? They're not a gang of politically motivated people. They were simply doing their job.
Yeah, I read the tweets, or I read the texts. That's not a gang of neutral people. That's a gang of people who want to use their power to sabotage a presidential campaign. That's what the FBI did under Andrew McCabe and his cohorts. That's what is still going on at the Justice Department in Rod Rosenstein's office with all of his deputies defending Andrew McCabe.
Well, Jay Christian Adams, always appreciate your input.
Thanks,
and
Katie.
bringing your experience to the table. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Street justice still ahead, and next, the White House with an angry response after an explosive New York Times article says the president made offensive comments about immigrants. All of it based on anonymous sources, of course. So is it fair? We're going to debate it next. Developing tonight, the White House denying a New York Times report citing anonymous sources that say President Trump spoke about immigrants, specifically groups from Haiti and Africa, in a derogatory way. The comments allegedly came during a June meeting with top administration officials. Only the White House says it didn't happen, responding, quote, General Kelly, General McMaster, Secretary Tillerson, Secretary Nielsen, and all other senior staff actually in the meeting deny these outrageous claims, and it's both sad and telling the New York Times would print the lies of their anonymous sources anyway. Here with reaction to this and much more, former Obama campaign foreign policy advisor David Tafuri and GOP strategist Ned Ryan. Well, Ned, here we have another New York Times story with a bunch of anonymous sources alleging that the president used the words AIDS to describe people living in Haiti and huts to describe refugees or immigrants from Nigeria. What do you have to say about this?
Well, Katie, I mean, this is hardly surprising. Here we go again. The opposition party at work. Again, the White House is denying. It's another anonymously sourced piece. That is another sad attack on Donald Trump. But, Katie, I think we're going to see more of this. We're going to see this increase as time goes along because, listen, their Russian collusion fairy tale is falling apart. The wheels are coming off the Mueller investigation. You see the economy surging. You see the markets surging. Trump's actually closing out a very strong first year despite a lot of different attacks. And the mainstream media, I think, starting to get a little bit more desperate. I mean, this guy wasn't supposed to win in the first place, Katie. Now he's actually succeeding. Wasn't he supposed to be impeached by now, according to some of them? Dear God, he's actually succeeding. And you see this liberal elite fury rising that those damnable peasants won't listen to us anymore. And I would tell the mainstream media, you know what? Get used to disappointment and get used to another 7 years of Trump because it's going to happen.
David, what's your reaction to another New York Times story throwing out these very aggressive allegations and without any on-the-record sources to back them up?
I hope your viewers will read this story because it paints a really troubling picture of the White House, and it's based on two sources who were in the meeting, and
anonymous.
Both of those sources...
Anonymous.
Yeah, they're anonymous because they get fired.
Put your name on the record.
Because they get fired if they said who they were. But they also contemporaneously told other people about these comments, and then the story itself is based on dozens of interviews that the New York Times did. And the New York Times knew that they was going to get a lot of pushback on this story, so it brought it up to its top editors. It evaluated the story, and you can be sure it's standing behind the story. Of course, we have libel laws, we have defamation. If anyone thinks the story is not true, they can bring an action against the New York Times.
The president's not gonna,
I bet that's not going to happen because it hasn't happened yet.
Happen. Well,
you know what?
The president is not going to. No. Let's move on to a different topic. The president is not going to bring a lawsuit against the New York Times because he'd be suing them every single day. However, let's move on to another topic. Last week, Attorney General Jeff Sessions officially announced an investigation into the handling of the Uranium One scandal under Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Ned, is this a good idea? Where is this going to go?
Of course it is. It's about time. I mean, I have a lot of questions. I wrote a piece actually for Fox News Opinion back in October. This deal was done in an expedited fashion. The CFIUS voting members, they got the paperwork in the first week of August of 2010. It was approved October 22nd of 2010. And there were deals, Katie. This was approved faster than a lot of the mergers between two U.S. companies that were approved by the antitrust division inside Obama's DOJ. Why was it expedited? The other question, Katie, is why were we giving away uranium when we actually have to import 89% of the uranium that we use? The other question I think needs to be answered is, we knew, some of the CFIUS voting members knew, there was a bribery attempt by the Russian government of U.S. executives in the uranium industry, and they still went ahead and approved this issue. And the last one, the $145 million question, Katie, is what is the relationship between the Uranium One deal and the Clinton Foundation? Was our Secretary of State at that time influence peddling and actually using her position for personal gain and putting it ahead of our national security interests?
So, David, on that note of national security, given your experience and your advising to former President Barack Obama, if Democrats are so worried about Russia being an influence in the world and being an enemy of the United States, which they are, by the way, why would Hillary Clinton sit on this board of directors, essentially, while having this conflict of interest at the Clinton Foundation, the Global Initiative, and approve the sale of uranium to Russia through another company?
It's important to get some of the facts straight. It's not a board of directors. CFIUS is a U.S. government committee that approves of mergers and acquisitions that will affect national security. There are 9 heads of U.S. government agencies on that committee. So there was no way that Hillary Clinton on her own could have dominated that committee. And any one out of the 9 can stop a deal. All 9 voted in favor of this deal. So it's important to get the facts right. Now, this is about 7 or 8 years old. It's been investigated before. If there's new evidence, like this informant, it should be investigated. You know what, Ned, let me finish. Let me ask you another question. It should be investigated, and if anything else comes up, then we should investigate it further. But so far, Sessions has refused to put in place a special counsel because there isn't sufficient evidence for there to be a special counsel.
David, let me jump in. David, let me jump in here.
All of this is a distraction.
But this is the capper because this is, again, the biggest tax cut, biggest reform of all time.
That was President Trump Friday, patting himself on the back for finishing the year strong. But Obama officials stung that their legacy is in tatters. All came out of nowhere this week, trying to rehab their former boss and attacking the sitting president. Here's Joe Biden with a whopper.
I've never met any president that has more character, more integrity, and more backbone than this guy does. It was an honor serving with him. And 8 years, not a hint, a scandal.
Wow. Joining me now, Fox News contributor, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. So, I mean, just off the top of my head, the VA scandal, people died waiting in line to get service and care, and you have the IRS, you have Benghazi, Fast and Furious, the list goes on and on.
Well, it's good to be with you. Merry Christmas, Jesse. And you're absolutely right. When I hear what former Vice President Joe Biden said, first of all, in 2013, President Obama was awarded with the PolitiFact Lie of the Year for his statement about people being able to keep their doctor and keep their insurance when it came to Obamacare. So that kind of takes away this whole thing about integrity. But you just brought up a series of incredible events, and you did not add in the new Black Panther voter intimidation case, which somehow went away. But when you think about Fast and Furious, where we saw U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry lose his life. You think about all the veterans that lost their lives in the VA scandal, and you think about the 4 Americans and the others who were wounded during Benghazi. These were very serious incidents, but yet no one was ever held accountable. No one ever really took any responsibility, and that continues to be a blight on the face of the American people and, of course, the Obama administration.
Because actually, Eric Holder
easily dismissed.
Was held in contempt for not being forthcoming with the Congress with regards to Fast and Furious. And now there's a new scandal that's brewing. Politico reported that because the Obama administration was so desperate to cut a deal with the Iranians that they let a bunch of Hezbollah arms dealers and cocaine traffickers off the hook. And, I mean, these people tried to kill Americans. They're pushing drugs into the country. That's going to be investigated now, we're hearing.
Well, it has to be investigated, and those of us that have been following national security issues, especially down in the Southern Command in South America, know that Iran has been supporting Hezbollah, which is their terrorist proxy army, for quite some time to get a foothold into South America. But for those Americans that have forgotten, before there was Al-Qaeda in 1983, the largest incident of a terrorist attack resulting in American deaths, 243 Marines, sailors, and soldiers lost their lives in the Beirut bombing, and that was Hezbollah. And the fact that we have a president that was putting pressure on our drug enforcement agency to stop an investigation of Hezbollah drug and gun smuggling so that they could get through the Iranian nuclear agreement, which we know the Iranians have not been adhering to whatsoever, that is very disconcerting.
Not only disconcerting, it's corrupt because the rest of the press won't cover it. And that's why someone like Biden can get away with saying that he's been scandal-free, because no one's even going to challenge him. The fact that you're sitting across from the former vice president and he comes out with a blatant lie like that, he can get away with it on the network shows, but he can't get away with it here. I want to talk to you about Susan Rice, former national security official for President Obama. Really, she should not be the one criticizing anybody. After President Trump unveiled his national security strategy, she said this, quote, "Relinquishing the nation's moral authority in these difficult times will only embolden rivals and weaken ourselves. It will make a mockery of the very idea of America first." So, Lieutenant Colonel, you know, when 4 Americans were left to die and not rescued on the anniversary of 9/11 in Benghazi, that was not putting America first. She has no legs to stand on here.
No, absolutely, and that is almost a self-fulfilling prophecy of her own tenure as the National Security Advisor. Think about it. This is the exact same Susan Rice that said that the United States of America needs to live with a nuclear North Korea. In other words, she continues to advocate for the strategic patience policy and strategy of Barack Obama. And when you think about the lack of regard and respect that we have, and I served in the military for 22 years, that was horribly diminished. You think about what President Trump has been able to do in less than a year, and that is to reduce the entire territorial integrity of the Islamic State, something that Barack Obama came out and talked about in his strategy, but he never accomplished it. And he kept telling us that something was coming and he was going to take an action. So I think that we are seeing, you know, as you mentioned earlier, is a complete reversal of the previous 8 years. And this is something that is not sitting well, to include an economy that is, you know, clicking along at 3.2% gross domestic product when the President Obama never even hit 2%.
That's true. And America First is the exact opposite of leading from behind, which Susan Rice was the architect of. Let's get into some other Obama officials. Here's the last one. So this is unbelievable. You have a photo, and this is a tweet from Dan Pfeiffer, and this was what he said. Here it is. "I hope this is the photo they use on the front page of the Times on the day Trump is indicted." Oh, that's very nice. And then Ben Rhodes, former national security guy for Obama, said, "And alongside the obits for Ryan, McConnell, and Pence." Really, the obits. And Steve Scalise responded, as you know, who was shot by a crazed left-wing maniac. "You may want to reconsider your rhetoric." So, you know, if you're out there and you're an Obama guy and you're talking about the obituaries for Trump people, come on, right? I mean, this is not in the season, Ben.
Well, one of the things you have to come to understand is when you have senior leaders and officials that are, you know, espousing this type of rhetoric, then there's always going to be someone out there that takes action. And unfortunately, we saw Steve Scalise be the victim of said rhetoric. But we have to move beyond this, and let's have the conversation about policy. Let's have the conversation about issues. This cannot continue to be about demonizing people, showing the commercials of a Paul Ryan pushing grandmother off the cliff, or talking about how Republicans and their tax bill and tax plan are going to end up killing people, or it's Armageddon and things of this nature. That is really the rhetoric of people that don't have any solutions to offer. And I hate to see that happening here in the United States of America, because we have tried, you know, the previous 8 years, and that did not yield us the results, being it our economy, being it our military, our foreign policy, whatever. So it's time for us to look at a different way to move forward.
Well, hopefully we can all come together in the Christmas season. Looks like you've come together in the Christmas season with that vest
Well, I only get to wear it once a year.
That's a festive
and so it's all for you, Jesse.
Well, thank you. I'm honored. I'm honored. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thank you.
All right. Up next, Dave Chappelle playing the race card.
I've never had a problem with white people ever in my life. But full disclosure, the poor whites are my least favorites.
I need you right now. So don't let me down.
The left taking any opportunity to attack President Trump, including his use of Merry Christmas. Here's CNN's Don Lemon.
Let's remember, President Trump isn't the only president who says Merry Christmas. President Obama and the First Lady Michelle Obama said it many, many times. This is a dog whistle to the base because no one has ever stopped saying Merry Christmas.
Joining me now to discuss is RNC spokeswoman Kayleigh McEnany and contributor at The Federalist, Britt McHenry. So, Kayleigh, he's basically saying when the president says Merry Christmas and emphasizes that now he's saying that again, it's signaling to his white supporters what exactly?
It's a ridiculous assertion to call that a dog whistle. It's the term Merry Christmas. And the reason President Trump says it so boldly is because the last president, President Obama, was the president who removed crucifixes before he spoke at Georgetown University, attacked the Little Sisters of the Poor, only to be rebuked by the Supreme Court. Christians were under attack in this country. Their rights were not respected. They could not live freely and openly without government intrusion. So that's what he means when he says it boldly, that we can celebrate now.
And as a veteran of the war on Christmas, because I was on the front lines for many years for the last 10 or 12 years in the field. This was happening in the country. It was department stores, it was schools, it was a cultural phenomenon. And now it looks like you can say Merry Christmas again, and a lot of people aren't super PC about it. And that's what this is all about. It's political correctness, right, Britt?
Yeah, I'm just glad that Don Lemon is counting how many times former President Obama said Merry Christmas instead of obsessing over President Donald Trump's tweets. The fact of the matter is there's reason to say that. On their official holiday card, the Obamas said just that, Happy Holidays.
Right.
The Trumps have said Merry Christmas. You went there. I was recently at the White House, had the blessed opportunity to be there. It was beautiful. Melania Trump did an amazing job. But of course, what does the Washington Post say? They slam her, call her decorations ominous in the hallway when you walk in. It was beautiful, but the media will never give that credit.
That's true. And you're right. In the 8 years under President Obama, all of his Christmas cards said Happy Holidays. And now they say Merry Christmas. So I want to get into another kind of racial bomb that has been thrown by comedian Dave Chappelle. Take a listen to this.
I've never had a problem with white people ever in my life. But full disclosure, the poor whites are my least favorites. Man, Donald Trump's gonna go to Washington and he's gonna fight for us. I'm standing there thinking to my mind, you dumb mother. You are poor. He's fighting for me.
Now, he's just a comedian, Kayleigh. But, I mean, there is kind of an undertone there that these dumb, poor, white Trump voters are just getting hoodwinked. Do you take this seriously or not?
No, I do take this very seriously. You know, we live in a society where liberals like to groupify people. They're the ones that are race conscious, putting people in groups based on their socioeconomic status. This was completely over the line. Imagine if this was reversed and a white comedian said this about another racial or ethnic group.
You could never say it.
He would be scrutinized as he should. You could never say it. This is ridiculous. And, you know, let's move on to a society where we can judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, like Martin Luther King hoped for.
That's true. I just don't want to get too uptight about it because he is a comedian and it was kind of funny. But he's crossing into the political zone, Britt. And you know, when you're a comedian, you cross over into politics, there's going to be a little blowback.
Yeah, he should call Chelsea Handler and Jimmy Kimmel, and they can all have a group therapy session about where their ratings are going by attacking President Trump and the voters. I just think that he should actually thank those poor whites that he allegedly doesn't like. They're his least favorite people, because electing Trump and the economy we now have, it's the lowest unemployment rate for for Black Americans in 17 years. So really, maybe he should be grateful for those people he condemns so much.
Yeah, he's just pushing the left-wing narrative that the tax cut's going to help out companies. But as we said at the top of the show, you know, those tax cuts and those corporations, you're getting $1,000 bonus checks for the holidays.
Yep.
Those go right into workers' pockets. All right, so again, the left not having a lot of success on the policy front, continuing to play the race card. This is what some Huffington Post guys said when President Trump did the whole, you know, gala congratulating himself about the tax cut, and Black Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina was standing by. Quote, "What a shocker. There's one black person there, and sure enough, they have him standing right next to the mic like a manipulated prop. Way to go, Senator Tim Scott." And the senator responded and basically buried him. Here he goes. Probably because I helped write the bill for the past year. Have multiple provisions included, got multiple senators on board over the last week, and have worked on tax reform my entire time in Congress. But if you'd rather just see my skin color, please feel free. So this is a white liberal, Kaylee, trying to play the race card on a black guy. Didn't work out too well.
Didn't work out. I think he actually apologized for that, as he should have.
He did.
But this is a good case study for the liberal worldview. They look at everything through the purview of race and gender. When they see Tim Scott, that is what they saw. They saw his race. They didn't see his achievement. They didn't see the fact that he has one of the greatest conservative records on the Hill, that he worked tirelessly for this. They looked at him for his race. It is sad. We should reject this type of thinking. And I can promise you, if this was a conservative that had done this, he probably would have lost his job.
Yeah, it's total hypocrisy. And you make a good point. I don't know what the Democratic Party believes when it comes to border security. I don't know what they believe when it comes to health care or taxes or defeating ISIS. I do know that the Democratic Party thinks Trump's racist. That's about it, Britt.
Well, that's the card they always throw out. And I find it funny that Ryder, in his apology, said he should have expressed his view differently. How much different are you going to express that? You're trying to discredit a man who put hours and excessive time into significant tax reform. If you're going to focus on race, why don't you highlight that he was the first black senator elected in the South since Reconstruction? Why don't you highlight he's an evangelical Christian and all the great things he's done to the community, as Kaylee mentioned? But no, it's always for insults, and look how that's working for the Democrats right now.
Right. Well, when you play the race card, it's usually the last card you have left to play. Ladies, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
That's not a dog whistle.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. All right, up next, a UFO sighting.
I've actually been abducted to the moon.
What do you think the ET's agenda was?
When I was strapped down on there, one of the little grays came and straddled me. They were taking tissue samples down in that region.
Excuse me?
Okay, this is where it gets really weird. You've got to believe me. A mantis